These are the mute sentinels of Easter Island, stone statues called moai. Roughly 900 moai were carved over a period of 500 years, hewn with stone tools from the volcanic rock of an ancient crater. No one knows how the many-ton statues came to stand at their sacred sites. How could an isolated culture with only the simplest tools move monoliths from the quarry to sacred platform sites scattered all over the island, some of them 5 miles away? Legend says the statues magically walked to their venerated platforms. To penetrate beyond the myths, Nova assembles a team of archaeologists, engineers, and the Easter Islanders themselves. Together, they launch a series of hands-on experiments to explore the methods used by the ancients. But no one anticipates the events that unfold.
We want to go little by little.
Ideas clash.
No, and I go by the statue because the angle is different.
Tensions escalate as new methods are presented.
I've got 12 people moving 6 tons. You didn't do that.
That's 65? Yeah. No way.
Resources run out, just as they did in ancient times.
What are we going to do, fight over it?
This is the legacy of Easter Island, a culture that exhausted itself in moving giant stone. How did this ancient society achieve such monolithic greatness? And why did it fall? Easter Island, now known as Rapa Nui. Today, treeless, windswept land rises from an infinite sea. Just 7 miles across, Easter Island is studded with volcanic craters which provide the raw material for the stone sculptures of the past. For 1,200 years, the island culture thrived in isolation. The population may have reached as much as 10,000. It was a closed society. As far as is known, nobody came to the island, and nobody ever left. There was no recorded history. And all that remains is a thin thread of oral tradition that is passed down through generations. We do know the ancient islanders feverishly expressed themselves in stone. According to island folklore, the moai are the spirits of powerful ancestors. They were raised on platforms called ahu, which were the centers for ancestral worship among the island's clans. But as population grew on the tiny island, conflict erupted between the clans. Food and timber were scarce. The people stripped the landscape of its once abundant trees. Today, only thin soils and exposed pastures survive. Could it be that this remote civilization ultimately destroyed itself over the moving and raising of their sacred moai? For decades, theorists have come to the island to try their hand at moving moai. In 1955, Norwegian archaeologist Thor Heyerdahl tried to drag a 9-ton moai on a small tree fork over the ground. The pulling method worked, but dragging a heavy statue is likely to damage the carved stone. Heyerdahl returned in 1986 inspired by Rapa Nui folklore. Legends say that the human statues walked across the island to their ahu platforms through a spiritual power called mana. Heyerdahl tried walking the 9-ton statue by rocking it forward like a refrigerator. Although it works, the method is precarious on anything but level terrain. Thousands of tourists come to gaze upon the stone giants and wonder how the Rapa Nui people moved and erected them.
Well, this project started in
Dr. Claudio Cristino has been Easter Island's resident archaeologist for the past 20 years. He takes Wyoming architect Vince Lee to the largest ahu on the island. It was one of the ceremonial centers on the East Coast. In 1960, a tidal wave struck the ahu and washed the 15 massive moai inland. Claudio was in charge of restoring the site.
Yeah,
the statue was broken, was decapitated.
I see.
And just the head was 27 tons.
The head alone?
Just the head.
And you had to put it back on and cement them together somehow?
Yeah, with no...
Vince's expertise is Inca stonework. He has explored how the Incas moved heavy stones and is intrigued by Rapa Nui ingenuity.
Is this more like the finish that they had when they were first made? In other words, most of them that you see now
more
are...
like here.
Oh, I see. Very smooth. Yeah, sure.
That's by what percent.
All of this is erosion due to, to weather over the years. They vary in size, but this one here at the top knot's got to be pretty big. How many tons is that?
65 tons.
Wow. And is that how you erected these, with a crane?
With a crane. With a crane, with 50 people, with ramps, with poles, with levers. So this gave us, for the first time, a quite clear idea of the incredible energy that was used in the past.
Even with modern equipment, it sounds like it was a huge project.
Even Vince and Claudio have trouble imagining how an ancient culture could have carved, transported, and erected such mighty stones without the aid of modern technology.
The meaning of the moai, to me, as an outsider to this island and to this culture, is ancestor. It's the link with the past. The meaning of the moai is family.
Archaeologist Joanne Van Tilburg is here to test her theory of how the moai were moved. For 15 years, she has searched for the cultural significance encoded in the moai.
When Rapa Nui people look at these statues and think about these statues, they are to them as if they are indeed living beings.
But with no written record left behind and only limited clues from archaeology, the question of how the Easter Islanders moved their moai remains elusive.
Science and mysticism, religion, faith, archaeology, engineering, all of these things are trying to come together here to understand what, when you look at it, is a relatively simple object. It's big, there's no question about that, but it's so beautifully designed in its simplicity that it offers us the possibility of answer. And yet the answer is so deeply embedded in the culture, and much of that answer, unfortunately, has been lost.
Joanne has measured the height, width, and estimated weight of each moai on Easter Island. Her inventory of measurements created a digital model of a statistically average moai.
And
so the computer data helps Joanne and robotics expert Zvi Schiller formulate their theory on how the ancients moved the statues.
Turns out there was some mistake there, but so this.
By digitizing a topographical map of Easter Island, Zvi simulates the undulating terrain. This virtual fly-through shows them a view of the island from the perspective of a moai in transit.
That's up
and down.
This is where we actually, this is the new part. And
from this digital model, a full-scale replica will be made for experiments on the island. Joanne proposes laying the statue on a triangular-shaped sled and then pulling the moai and sled over logs that roll along wood tracks.
Safe for the statue, it's comfortable for the statue.
Our team of experts has gathered on the island to put their theories to the test.
The best way to fit them is standing them up.
They will first try Joanne's log roller method.
Back and get it at another time. That's an option.
And the other thing,
Claudio will be in charge of raising the moai.
And the people that study this culture for years know that any of these events was part of a very complex religious process that took years. I mean,
Vince is the only member of the group who has explored how another ancient culture, the Incas, moved heavy stone.
From an engineering standpoint, a triangle is the simplest.
While engineers V. Schiller has simulated moai transportation on his computer, he's here to see if his solutions will work in the real world. Rafael Rapu, a Rapa Nui sculptor, will be the foreman for the project.
What's the height?
we don't care.
That's not important.
That's not important.
Joanne's architect husband, Jan, demonstrates Joanne's moai moving
Before we
method.
do that, the tracks are a little bit of
A triangular A-frame sled will be placed on logs that will roll over rails.
And then you just pull this forward, and when you run out of a roller, we're going to put another one there. You run out of a roller.
They have their method. Now they need a moai. A concrete mixture of sand and stone from the island is poured into a fiberglass mold scaled up from Joanne's digital model. It is as close as the team can get to using a moai without risking damage to an actual statue. Three days later, the 9.5-ton concrete moai is ready to be lifted out of its curing pit.
It's a wonderful thing to see this thing being born like this.
Even with the aid of a crane, the moai is an unwieldy object.
He's going to drop it down and pull it back. Exactly right.
Hey!
Discussion.
Not with this little rope.
No, with a boom. He's going to do it with a boom.
Chainsaw surgery frees the moai from its fiberglass mask.
All right. Tip her over.
From a digital computer image to a concrete facsimile, this moai is the culmination of years of Joanne's research.
People call me the mother of the moai, and right now I feel very fond of that object. So I can see how people would invest family histories and family traditions in something like this. It's very easy to do.
More than half of Easter Island's moai are still at the quarry, known as Rano Raraku. It is a mountain of hardened volcanic ash. Here the moai lie in various stages of production. Some half-carved, some on their backs, as if sliding down the quarry slope, and others buried from carving debris and erosion. Rafael Rapu comes from a long line of Rapa Nui carvers. He takes local sculptor Santi Hito to the high slopes of the quarry to explain the techniques used by the ancient carvers. They sculpted moai from the bedrock using a stone tool called a toki. The largest moai on the island, named El Gigante, the giant, was never finished. Its partially carved figure provides a glimpse into how the moai were carved. Continuing the tradition of Rapa Nui master carvers, Rafael passes on the oral history to Santi.
His words came from the elder people when he was a young boy. And so it transcends from them to him, as is right now. You can, witness how it transcends to